Perhaps this is the first documentary about Marawi that has been produced since the Marawi siege in 2017 outside of the television network production. The Marawi siege was waged by a band of armed men called the Mautes in May 2017, and the full force government military counterattack against the allegedly ISIS backed group ensued. Aerial bombs rained down the city to flush the Mautes. The battle between the rebels and the government forces took months, effectively destroying the city and displacing thousands of Maranaos. This is the context of A House in Pieces. We are here with the directors Claire and Manuel to tell us more about how they were able to piece together A House in Pieces. Perhaps a good place to start the discussion is to ask about your backgrounds, Claire and Manuel. What do you do other than make films, of course, and how did you two get to work together on this project?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. I actually teach in UP. Yeah, and I'm a Mindanaoan. So before shooting A House in Pieces, we actually worked together on a documentary titled Pagara sa Patipuron, which was also nominated in Sinag Manila for Best Documentary, and that's how we started working, Manuel and I. So yeah, my background is really the academe, and aside from making films, and I also worked as a journalist in Mindanao for years before moving out of the country to take my master's. So yeah.
I'm not from the Philippines, as you may see, but I've actually worked in Mindanao for several years in most of the 2010s with two different NGOs and working in the peace and conflict transformation field. And especially towards the end of that, we started working more with filmmakers in terms of trying to communicate what are some of the dynamics, some of the sort of historical injustices, conflicts that are fueling into this whole very complicated situation in Mindanao. So, and I'd never been able to travel to Marawi before while still working for my previous employers because of security restrictions. And I'm very shiny now. So, sorry, very informal. So the place Mindanao and Marawi for me already meant a lot before Marawi happened, and then when the war started and when the bombs started falling, Claire and I just felt like we were kind of ready to really embark on a more long-term project, also in line with Stories Beyond, that she founded Vision to tell long-term stories of communities and how they're transforming and changing. So we first started shooting around Marawi while the war happened in evacuation centers, and that's where we first met our protagonists. And then we agreed with them that as the situation evolved, we could continue to follow their lives and how they would be trying to go back to their home.
How is it working? Of course, I think martial law was declared a few weeks after, right? When martial law was declared, how was your access to Marawi?
It wasn't, I mean, of course, like when Manuel mentioned, I founded Stories Beyond, right, to tell restorative and transformative narratives of communities. And we started working on different documentaries. And when the war happened, it wasn't really hard to get access because we went to Iligan first, and we went to the evacuation centers first, because one of the visions of Stories Beyond is to tell the stories of communities outside of the usual fare of reporting about war, which is about numbers, and there's no human face to it. It's just about casualties, who wins, who loses, and so on. So we did get to go to Iligan at that time when the war was still going on, and we had access because we found an NGO who was working with the evacuees, the internally displaced at that time, and that's how we found our stories.
I guess what you could feel with martial law being declared was that the sort of the levels of suspicion and sometimes a little bit paranoia were definitely higher than without martial law. In terms of access, we had to negotiate a lot with the military, with Task Force Bangon Marawi. We made so many courtesy calls, but I guess since our protagonists are very kind of ordinary people who are in this very extraordinary situation, we took a sort of low-key approach. And then sometimes I remember being asked by one high-ranking official, "You guys are still here, you know, what are you still doing?" Because they didn't really kind of see the value of doing this kind of documentary that doesn't have like talking heads and experts explaining what's going on. So in a sense, I guess that was good because we got around some of the martial law sort of effects in terms of how people talk.
But we did actually experience some form of problems with the military while shooting this this film. So we almost got detained, and yes, it's out there now, but because this film is over. But yeah, we got stopped by the military, and we were put in another place for one day, so we couldn't shoot. So even though we went through so many like layers of bureaucracy, like asking permission to shoot and so on, so there's still that experience shooting this film. Yes.
Yeah, I was thinking, but when did you start shooting the family, Carpenter's family, Yusuf and his wife? Because you can see that the set that the Maranaos have come back to their homes. They were just looking at the background, which was the ground zero, no, where the Maranaos still cannot go back to.
Where the house is,
at which point did you start documenting that part, which is the core of your story, rebuilding after the war?
Yeah. We met Yusuf and Farhana in the evacuation center in Iligan. And we found the story in them, like, oh wow, this is like a good family because he's a carpenter, so it's a good metaphor. But you know, like what if he goes home, he's able to go home and then he can rebuild, you know. So but we waited for them to go back talaga, so to the place if they were able to go back. So we kept communicating with them until when they said that they were back in Marawi. And then when we got to their house, that's when we found a really good view of
image.
Right, Manuel?
Yeah, so we first met them, I think August 2017. That's when we first came to Iligan, and those were actually some of the very first people that we met. And they just Farhana just had a newborn baby, and they were worried about, you know, feeding him. That's Walid in the film. And then and then we first saw them in Marawi with this very kind of striking view because their house was really overlooking ground zero, and we were like, yeah, this is really going to be a story about home and about this place that was and what it is now. And we ended up, the last time we shot with them was a bit over a year ago, last June 2019. So in that time, like, you know, the little kid actually started growing up and walk and talk. So that was something that was also for us very emotional to stay with this and have this privilege to be allowed into their lives.
The documentation spanned 2 years, 2017 to 2019. Yeah. How about the editing?
It depends about, I guess, like from the first we started putting together scenes during the process.
During the process.
Yeah.
But then we really found the sort of final form towards the end of shooting it, and realizing that we should really trust what's there and trust the protagonist stories. And then from there, it was about another half year.
Yeah, but we also got help from Docs by the Sea because we got into the editing lab. So thankfully, we had good mentors who guided us to find the heart of our story. So it was really like a really interesting experience to be able to like really narrow it down and find that, okay, this is like the main focus. And and after that, after Docs by the Sea, we started editing more, and so it took a while.
I like that. Trust in the protagonist's story.
Yes.
Look in the trust in the material, which is a very documentary. It's really a practice that it's much needed in documentary. Connected to this, what were the assumptions that were validated and also discarded while shooting A House in Pieces? About Maranaos, basically, or
Or
Wow.
whatever.
What to say?
Well, one of the things that I admire about like Farhana, for instance, because there's this stereotype that Muslim women are subservient, that they're powerless. But she defies that stereotype talaga. Like I could see that she is very like she has her own agency and strength despite what they're going through and they're struggling. And it was really interesting when we started going to the communities. Like most of the people who talk to us and are more articulate are the Maranao women. They're very they share a lot of themselves and
Very
so on.
hands-on.
Yeah, very very hands-on talaga, even in the
yeah, you
evacuation
can see it.
centers. Yeah.
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 You can see it with a woman, and I can see how that panned out. No, in the documentary, you ended with her. You ended with her fully made up, and then she made that statement about staying despite all of it. It's such a refreshing representation of the Muslim woman.
Yeah. But there is also like I noticed also that it's very complex, like in terms of the war itself, like the issue is very complex, and it really involves like that's why we didn't want to tell the story that okay, this is a war between two, just two parties and so on. Like there's a lot of cultural underpinnings there that we also stumbled upon in the process.
And these very complex layers of relationships, for me, I mean, that was very striking for sure. How you could have a cousin who is affiliated with one of the jihadist groups, and you could have an uncle in the Philippine army, and then the Maranaos have to sort of negotiate that field, and that's the reality. So it's very messy, and we're also kind of trying to like not over explain things, because you just have to kind of sort of immerse yourself in that world. And for me, like one thing that was striking was just how beautiful the place was, for sure. And even now, like in the environment and with the lake and the mountains and what you can still see from the city, even if it's so horribly destroyed, like you can just feel the beauty of the place and the people also. So that was for sure
I can see,
surprise.
the part, that complication part, you inserted in this one sequence where a father is talking about the death of his son, and attributed this as shahid, or martyrdom. So it is a story that I keep hearing about. In 2017, a group I am affiliated with, started a series of fundraising events and educational talks about Marawi. And in one of the talks, they highlighted the plight of the orphans of the decades-long war, who are the most vulnerable targets for recruiters to the ICs. So what did you get to know about this story. I feel that this is the like thick layer of complexity that encompasses the story of A House in Pieces.
Because we had so many people that we talked about, and we talked about the difficult topics, like the violent extremism that is happening around them, and the answers, their beliefs are very different, and it's very ambivalent even until now. As we talk to our friend, like they say, like it's it's up to Allah, but then a lot of people are also like angry at the Maute for bombing, for going to war in their place, destroying their city, and they're angry at the soldiers. But some of them are also not sympathizing, but they could understand why the Maute did that. And like Manuel said, there were a lot of like complexities, because a lot of relationships, like family relationships, are part of this really,
Yeah.
like, divide, so complicated.
Varied.
Yeah, and we found the Maote fighter through some people, and we wanted to insert that because it somehow also like parallels with what the driver is saying about a lot of things about jihad and why people joined the war. For the Maote fighter, he lost a son, but he's not he's not resentful for that. And it was a long interview, but like we just got it, like the important parts.
I I guess,
Yeah.
like, I mean, one thing that was always underlying when we shot with the family was like there, even after the war, there was this continuing sense of threat and of fear. And you would hear like like in the last scene, you would hear this talk about that there might be another attack and so on. And we were like, we need to give this a face also. Like, it's actually kind of a bit of an injustice to our main protagonists to just have them speculate about their fear and so on when you don't understand where that comes from. And it's very real until now, and at the same time it's really complicated by these layers of relationships, and even evacuees kind of saying like, of course it's horrible that I lost my house, but in the end, like, Allah will judge the Maute, and I'm not gonna say it was wrong. And that and since you were asking about assumptions and surprises, I mean, that was something that until now I find hard to understand.
Very surprising.
It's very human, no?
Yeah.
And I like that the narrative incorporated that, not as that it respects the the material as is, that it sees, and because of that it doesn't over explain, which brings me to, so there is an interweaving of folk tale animal stories that is quite prominent in the documentary. Could you tell us more about your editing decision about this? It's quite prominent, no?
Yeah.
I do remember,
and it
that
actually establishes this mood in general.
yeah, that's true. I do remember that at one point we were thinking of calling the film Dogs, Snakes, Chickens, and Pigeons on a Boulevard. It just happened, no? Clear? I don't know.
It just happened. It's part of their lives, kasi that's why, like, it just happened. And then somehow when it was part of the story, I sort of said like, oh my God, this is a good metaphor. But then, like, it's, right, Manuel, it was just even the pigeons, it just happened.
Yeah, you could, I mean, like, of course, all these animals are very symbolic, and they have different meanings. Sometimes you see them, sometimes they're just being talked about. Like, unfortunately, we didn't see the snakes, for instance. but of course it speaks in the scenes, it speaks to their emotions towards home as well, you know, like, I mean, probably most clearly with the pigeons. And I remember, like, we were actually shooting something with another protagonist around Marawi, and we were just sort of making a call at the family. At that point, I think we didn't even know if we were still going to shoot more with them. And then Yusuf had his pigeons back, and we were like, all right, we need to work with this, you know, like, because we didn't know, like, he didn't tell us that he was breeding pigeons before.
Yeah, I feel para siya post-human look to the post-human view to the war, no? The war that rationalized well where the human and the animals are living together, rebuilding a place that was brought down by human destruction, then human can.
And the animals are still inhabiting it,
Yeah. In connection to that, what's also prominent are the songs. Lullabies. Not just lullabies or traditional Maranao songs. I had LSS of Boulevard. After that, I kept on listening to Boulevard after that. But you've pretty much incorporated also the songs. Lullabies were also very interesting.
And
lyrics, especially, you know.
The lyrics.
Well, we were lucky. I guess, like, we were lucky to have protagonists, like female protagonists who love to sing. Like for Hannah, for instance, she just made up that the lyrics of the song when we started shooting. It wasn't like, oh, she sang it and we were just shooting and she started singing that song and came up with it. So for Nancy naman, parang we were just like driving the car and shooting, and then the song just started.
So a lot of this, I think, was like guided by kind of the animals and the songs and the music. A lot of this was guided by the feel of what we just saw, because it was not a very directive shoot in that sense. Like, you know, for the longest time, we were actually kind of very open to where things were going to go. And then it only sort of
observational
more towards the end. So, you know, when all these things with the animal symbolisms and all this music and so on just happened, we were like, of course, you know, this is our experience of the place, and we're gonna work this into our story.
Has this film been seen by them, by your subjects, by Yusuf, by
actually, it's unfortunate because we were planning to show them the film in March before the Ang Dokyo. So we were already had plans to go back.
We already
to
had tickets.
Yeah, we had tickets, and then the lockdown happened, so we couldn't go. So, but we're still planning to show it to them, of course, definitely.
Okay.
Ideally before.
Yeah. Bianca has been telling me to wrap up. I would have wanted longer. Yeah, but as last words, perhaps you can share the general mood of the Maranaos who you've talked to from the time of the evacuation to the time of rebuilding. So what is the future that they see for themselves that they were willing to share to you, given that you are mediators, no?
Well, as you can, I would like to parang show in the film that there is that sense of resilience then, that there is a sense of hope there. But actually, the reality still is that a lot of Maranaos are still unable to return to their homes. So for me, I'm happy that this film is part of the Ang Dokyo. So a lot of Filipinos will watch the film and still create a conversation about Marawi, because the war has been almost forgotten, and it's been like almost like 3 years or since 2017, and nothing has changed. And so right now there's still a lot of insecurities going on in the Maranao community about their future, and you know, a lot of there's really still a hard time rebuilding their lives, and especially with the pandemic, you know, that also like added to the sense of insecurity.
we could really see like all this strength, all this wisdom, all this resilience that, like, I think especially the family shows very clearly. And at the same time, like, you're faced with this situation and the situation is not moving because the conversation is not moving. So almost, I mean, at the time of the film showing, it's going to be 3 years almost to the days since Duterte declared victory. And, you know, it's still like that. So I'm kind of afraid that it's going to slide into sort of apathy and hopelessness. And I really hope that, you know, that there will be a future for this place that's good, because it's such an amazing city and amazing people. And now I sound like Donald Trump, but you know, it's really it's so rich and it's so layered, and there's such a beautiful and rich culture there as well, despite all the sort of dark sides that are also part of it. So yeah, I'm hoping like especially for the children of the family, that they're gonna have a good.
Thank you very much, Manuel and Claire.
Thank you, Tara.
House in Pieces is an important work because it pieces together a comprehensive narrative of the war from the start to now. The fact that the Maranaos are still displaced and are still trying to go back to ground zero, and nothing has been done. This is needed. This is a very much needed representation. Please watch the documentary in Daang Docu. Thanks again.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jaja.